Near the beginning of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Palafin was banned from Smogon's OU format. It was an incredibly overpowered Pokemon. Palafin is built in the Achilles heel archetype. Its stats are incredible, similar to that of a legendary Pokemon, but it has a crippling ability that keeps it in check, like Slacking or Regigigas. But there's one problem. Palafin's Achilles heel isn't really that bad. At least not in OU. Palafin starts out in the Zero form, which is effectively useless, but the next time it comes out in its Hero form. Having to spend one turn to switch isn't really a big deal at all in a 6v6 format where games typically go on for a long time. In the fast-paced VGC format where every turn matters, it's a major drawback, and the Palafin trade-off is a much more nuanced decision. But in OU, that drawback doesn't exist, and it's a vanilla overpowered Pokemon who was banned without much controversy. However, over the past 2 years, a lot of new and returning Pokemon have joined the metagame through DLCs and Pokemon Home. For example, Ogerpon Water is now a top Pokemon whose ability is Water Absorb, can one-hit KO Palafin with a Grass-type move, and outspeeds it too. Raging Bolt is another top Pokemon who's Electric Dragon and whose signature move is an Electric-type version of Sucker Punch. Sinistra joins the metagame as a defensive grass type and whose Strength Sap heals off anything that Palafin can throw at it. Moreover, Rillaboom made a comeback and one-hit KOs Palafin with a priority Grassy Glide, and Alomomola, the best physical defensive water-type Pokemon, also made a comeback too. And on top of all of that, there's still Kyurem with its powerful Freeze Dry. The metagame of today is very different from the original metagame 2 years ago that banned Palafin. And fans of Palafin wanted it to get a second chance, to be reintroduced into the metagame. And it happened. There was a 2-week trial period known as a suspect test where Palafin was given a chance on the ladder. At the end of the trial period, qualified voters would vote to either ban or do not ban Palafin. And, drumroll please, 75% of people voted to ban Palafin and Palafin stayed banned. So what happened? Why was Palafin still overpowered after all these metagame changes? Why did the free Palafin movement fail? The answer is a combination of complex factors, but one big issue was that Palafin was still the same Pokemon. While it's clear the metagame has shifted to be less favorable to Palafin compared to the pre-DLC era, that doesn't change Palafin's individual strengths. No matter how many water resists you add to the game, it still has the same box legendary stat totals and insane damage that the majority of the tier cannot compete with. To get an idea of the scale, Palafin has better bulk than Goldengo, it has the base speed of Zapdos, and it has the game-breaking physical attack of Hoopa Unbound. Typically, Pokemon with a game-breaking stat needs to have a mechanical flaw in how they work in order to be OU. For example, Kyurem Black in older generations literally didn't have an Ice-type physical move, and it was allowed in OU. Meanwhile, Hoopa Bound is too slow, too frail physically, and has a poor defensive typing. In all of these situations, it's not the metagame accounting for these Pokemon, it's more so that the Pokemon's design flaws balanced itself out. In fact, when Kyurem Black finally did get a physical Ice-type move, it was immediately banned. You can contrast that to Zamazenta, who also has a high stat total, but it's very evenly distributed, making it balanced. Palafin is a combination of the two ideas. You have the game-breaking stats with well-rounded stats everywhere. The OU metagame simply isn't designed to handle Pokemon with attacks that high, no matter how many dragon types or water resists you add. Once you get to the damage of that scale in OU, you can easily 2-hit KO the entire tier regardless of type matchup. There's no metagame innovation that can possibly hinder that level of power defensively. You can try offensive counterplay, but again, Palafin has no clearly defined weakness due to its otherwise well-rounded stats. There's no weak point to abuse in Palafin. Palafin is nearly perfect in design. And because Palafin doesn't have to worry about a big weakness, it has the freedom to use almost any moveset it wants. Pokemon with massive weaknesses like Hoopa Unbound are limited in what roles they can fulfill. Hoopa is only good for stall breaking or being a bulky attacker switching into special attacking moves. Hoopa Unbound isn't good for speed control or as a bulky pivot even with its high stat total. However, Palafin can function as pretty much anything. It can be a bulky pivot with Flip Turn, speed control with Choice Scarf or Jet Punch, a wall breaker with Choice Band, and many other viable ideas too. That's because Palafin lacks pressure from the metagame to conform to a specific role. It's able to fully use every tool in its arsenal as nothing in the metagame can stop Palafin. That set diversity from the lack of metagame pressure is kind of a proof that the metagame could not really adapt to Palafin. While having many viable movesets isn't anything new in Gen 9 OU due to terrestrialization, it doesn't mean Pokemon can never be overpowered for having too many good movesets. Volcarona is a really good example. With Quiver Dance and so many unique Tera types, it was ultimately banned for being overpowered. Likewise, Palafin has a similar strength in that preparing for either Choice Band or Bulk Up or Choice Scarf or Mystic Water was too demanding for a single team. Palafin's 160 attack flip turn and wave crash boosted off of choice band meant you needed an elite physically defensive water type like Dondozo or Toxapex to counter it. However, if you do that, then Palafin's bulk up sets with Taunt or Encore easily shut down those Pokemon. If you tried an offensive approach, Palafin could outspeed you with Choice Scarf or Choice Banded Jet Punch, which is a priority move. And even if you do outspeed Palafin, it's so tanky that it can live any attack and hit back with strong moves like Close Combat. And on top of that, there's so many Tera types too. You can have Tera Fire to make you immune to Will-O-Wisp, you could have Tera Fairy to take on Dragon type Pokemon, and you could even use Tera Electric to reverse the matchup on Electric type Pokemon like Zapdos. Palafin had a lot more viable Tera types than the average Pokemon, and that's because it's already elite. Palafin has no clearly defined weakness, so the Tera type can be whatever best fits your team, further adding to its diversity. A good example of Palafin fitting whatever teams need was Roller K's Sticky Web Hyper Offense. On this team, Palafin used a bulk up moveset with the item Life Orb. It would outspeed most Pokemon due to Sticky Web and then easily one-hit KO the entire tier. Even Choice Scarf Pokemon who could outspeed Palafin would get knocked out by Life Orb Jet Punch. With Sticky Web, the aforementioned Ogerpon Water would literally faint to a close combat instead. This versatility became a contributing factor for why players couldn't handle Palafin, even with all the new DLC Pokemon. Being a water resist isn't enough because you take so much damage from each attack. And that's especially true when you add on hazard damage too. All of the notable water resistant OU are all very weak to hazard. Ogerpon Water can't hold heavy duty boots, Raging Bolt typically likes to run its booster energy item instead, and other ideas like Rillaboom or Primarina were all susceptible to the idea of getting hit by flip turn and hazards racking up damage over time. You would often see Spikes Tinglu used alongside Palafin. You don't even need Spikes for that idea, you can flip turn out on switches to maintain momentum. You don't need to deal with a bad matchup when you can flip turn for a lot of damage and switch into a better one. When Rillaboom switches into you, all you do is flip turn into your Moltres. There's a variety of different moves that can make this more challenging too. Raging Bolt can take on Wave Crash and then hit first with Thunderclap, but Palafin can use Encore and lock you into that move. Or like in this battle, you can use Priority Jet Punch to outspeed Thunderclap anyway. Ogerpon Water may have immunity to water, but it can't switch in safely because Palafin's close combat is incredibly strong. And again, with Tera Palafin, you're able to beat whatever you want. In this battle, Palafin uses Tera Steel against Rillaboom. The opponent actually predicted it with U-turn, but the Palafin player still holds an advantage. The quote-unquote answers to Palafin acted less as counterplay and more so delaying the inevitable. You can say that the metagame did become more hostile to Palafin, there's no denying that, but Palafin is like a step below Arceus Water. It'll take much more than simple metagame shifts to make Palafin balanced in OU. And that's what ultimately happened and why the free Palafin movement failed. It's a boring answer, but Palafin was still too strong. You close combat Ogerpon Wellspring, you flip turn on everything else, and there's no stopping you. Palafin was banned and that's that. Can the free Palafin movement come back? I doubt it. Power creep is expanding every generation, and maybe the return of, Mega Pokemon can do something. But Palafin is still a 670 base stat Pokemon, it's still perfect in almost every way, and we'll need a lot of power creep to ever make that Pokemon balanced, at least in OU. But who knows? Once upon a time we called Garchomp overpowered, and now it's in the UU tier. Only time can tell what's really gonna happen.